A sterile millionaire with only 1 week to live walks the streets supported by an oxygen tank when he finds a little beggar girl crying after being rejected by dozens of people. "Sir, can you give me some food, please?" she pleads. Suddenly, he asks a question that even surprises himself. "Girl, do you want to be my daughter?" Suddenly, she starts crying, and what happens in the next few seconds leaves everyone in shock. The light March rain that afternoon had turned the streets into grey mirrors, reflecting a heavy sky that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Edward Morgan walked slowly down Maple Avenue, each step accompanied by the soft hiss of the oxygen tank he wheeled beside him. At 52, the man who had once commanded business empires now depended on a machine to breathe. Dr. Carter's words still echoed in his mind like a cruel taunt. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Morgan, but with the current progression of the disease, we estimate you have about a week left." 1 week, 7 days for a lifetime of regrets, for decades of relationships sacrificed on the altar of financial success. Edward paused before a toy store window, observing colorful dolls and toy cars. He'd never bought for children he'd never had. His $200 million fortune meant nothing against the consuming loneliness. He had built an empire, but forgotten to build a family. Now, ironically, he had all the money in the world, but neither time nor people to share it with. The sound of soft sobs pulled him from his melancholy thoughts. Turning, he saw a small figure huddled near a lamppost. It was a little girl, no more than 6, wearing a tattered little coat and worn-out sneakers that no longer protected her feet from the damp ground. Her brown hair was disheveled, and tears streamed down her cheeks, rosy from the cold. Edward watched for a few moments, noticing how passers-by hurried past, some deliberately averting their gaze, others pretending not to see her. An elegant lady laden with expensive shopping bags muttered something about "these street kids" and quickened her pace. A man in a suit checked his watch and also moved on, as if child poverty were just another obstacle in his daily rush. The girl looked up as Edward approached. Her eyes were brown, large and expressive, contrasting with the pallor of her thin face. She stared at him for a moment, seemingly gauging whether he would be another person to ignore or shoo her away. "Mr." she said in a trembling voice, wiping her nose on her coat sleeve. "Could you get me something to eat, please? I haven't eaten since yesterday." Edward felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't just the child's hunger that touched him, but the dignity with which she made her request. She didn't beg, didn't whine, she just asked with the politeness someone, at some point in her short life, had taught her. He knelt slowly, bringing himself to her eye level. The oxygen tank made a soft hiss as it touched the wet ground. For an instant, Edward saw his own childhood reflected in those eyes. He too had known hunger, loneliness, before hardening his heart and vowing never to be vulnerable again. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice softer than it had been in years. "Sophia," she replied, wiping away more tears. "My grandma called me Sophia. She died last month, and I don't have anyone else." The girl's words hit Edward like a punch to the gut. Here he was, lamenting his own loneliness, while a 6-year-old child faced the world utterly alone. Suddenly, a question formed in his mind, a question that surprised even himself. "Sophia," he said, the words tumbling out before he had fully processed. What he was saying, "Would you like to be my daughter?" The girl blinked several times, as if unsure she had heard correctly. Edward, too, couldn't believe what he'd just asked. In his entire life, he had never shown an interest in fatherhood, always considering children an impediment to his professional goals. "Really?" Sophia whispered, her eyes filling with a light he hadn't seen since she'd started speaking. "Really?" Edward confirmed, surprised by the conviction in his own voice. Sophia looked at him for a long moment as if trying to decipher if this was real or just another cruel dream. Then, with tears streaming down her face, but different tears now, she nodded vigorously. "Can I give you a hug, Daddy?" Edward felt his heart race in a way it hadn't for decades. Sophia's hug was like a ray of sunshine breaking through decades of emotional winter. Edward felt the girl's thin arms wrap around his neck, and for a moment he completely forgot about the oxygen tank, the illness, the death sentence he carried. There was only this small child who had just called him Daddy, and the strange, wonderful feeling of being needed by someone. "Let's get out of this rain," he said gently, helping Sophia to her feet. "You must be cold." Sophia nodded, shivering slightly. Edward took off his Italian wool coat, which had cost more than many people earned in a month, and wrapped it around the girl's small shoulders. The coat was huge on her, almost touching the ground, but Sophia pulled it tighter around herself, inhaling the scent of expensive cologne and cleanliness. "Where are we going?" she asked, walking beside him, taking small steps to match his slow pace. "Home," Edward replied, and as he said the words, he realized that for the first time in decades, his empty mansion might actually become a home. The taxi they hailed was ordinary, but to Sophia, it seemed like a palace on wheels. She touched the leather upholstery reverently, watched the power windows go up and down as if by magic. Edward observed her every reaction, feeling a tenderness he hadn't known still existed within him. "Daddy?" Sophia said timidly during the ride. Edward's heart skipped a beat. He still wasn't used to that word being directed at him. "Yes, sweetheart? Can I really live with you? It's not just for today, is it?" Edward swallowed hard. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that he only had a week to live? How could he say he was offering a temporary home, not by choice, but by fate's cruel limitation? "You'll live with me for as long as we can be together," he said, choosing his words carefully. "And I promise that, while we're together, you'll never go hungry or sleep on the streets again." Sophia nodded solemnly, as if understanding there were layers of meaning in those words she couldn't yet grasp. Edward's mansion was in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, an imposing structure, with perfectly manicured lawns and a marble fountain at the entrance. Sophia got out of the taxi and stood still, looking up with her mouth slightly agape. "Is this where you live?" she asked, incredulous. "This is where we live," Edward corrected, feeling an unexpected satisfaction at her amazement. Martha, the housekeeper who had cared for the house for 15 years, opened the door with her usual efficiency, but stopped dead in her tracks upon seeing Edward accompanied by a ragged child. "Mr. Morgan?" she said, confused. "Has something happened?" "Martha, this is Sophia," Edward said, placing a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "She's my daughter, and from today, she'll be living with us." Martha blinked several times, clearly processing the information. In 15 years working for Edward, she had never seen any sign of his interest in children or family, but something in her employer's tone, in the way he looked at the girl, made her simply nod. "Of course, sir. I'll prepare one of the guest rooms." "The blue room," Edward specified, "the one overlooking the garden." Sophia followed Edward through the entrance hall, her wide eyes taking in every detail. The crystal chandelier, the marble staircase, the paintings on the walls. Everything was bigger, brighter, and cleaner than any place she had ever been. "Are you hungry?" Edward asked. Sophia nodded shyly. Edward headed to the kitchen and, for the first time in years, personally opened the refrigerator. He didn't know how to cook. He'd always had staff for that. But he found ingredients for a simple sandwich. As he awkwardly prepared the snack, Sophia sat on a high stool at the counter, swinging her little legs that didn't reach the floor. "Daddy," she said again. "Why did you choose me?" There were other kids on the street. Edward stopped slicing the tomato and looked at her. How could he explain it hadn't been a rational choice, but something that had sprung from the deepest part of his soul? How to say that, in the moment he saw her, he recognized his own loneliness reflected in those eyes. Sometimes, he said slowly, people find each other exactly when they need each other the most. Sophia considered this answer with adult-like seriousness. I prayed for Grandma to send someone to take care of me, she said. I think she sent you. Edward felt a strange emotion welling in his throat. He didn't believe in prayer, divine intervention, or anything that couldn't be quantified on financial spreadsheets. But looking at Sophia with her eyes full of simple faith and gratitude, he began to question his atheistic certainties. The sandwich was ready, lopsided and unevenly layered but made with love. Sophia received it as if it were the most precious meal in the world, eating slowly, savoring every bite. Is it good? Edward asked, anxious. It's the best sandwich I've ever had in my life, Sophia replied sincerely. In that moment, Edward understood something fundamental. Maybe it wasn't too late to learn how to be a father. Sophia's first night in the mansion was a revelation for both of them. Edward had asked Martha to prepare the blue room with their best linens, but when he went to check if the girl was settled, he found her sitting in the center of the king-size bed, looking diminutive amidst so much luxury. Can't sleep? He asked, leaning against the doorframe with the oxygen tank beside him. Sophia shook her head, looking around the room with a mixture of awe and insecurity. It's too big, she whispered, and too quiet. On the street there was always noise. Edward understood immediately. For a child who had spent weeks sleeping on park benches and in doorways, the absolute silence of the mansion must be frightening. He approached and sat on the edge of the bed. Want me to stay here until you fall asleep? Sophia's eyes lit up. Could you? Of course. Edward settled into the armchair beside the bed, adjusting his oxygen tube. Did your grandma used to tell you stories to help you sleep? She did, Sophia said, hugging the pillow. She knew lots of beautiful stories, Cinderella, Snow White. And which one was your favorite? Sophia thought for a moment. The one about the little girl who found a family that truly loved her. Edward felt his heart clench. I don't know that one. Can you tell me? Sophia began to narrate with the sweetness of a child, inventing details as the story unfolded. She spoke of a girl who lived alone, but one day found people who made her feel special and cherished. Edward realized she was, in fact, telling her own fantasy, her greatest wish transformed into a fairy tale. When Sophia finally fell asleep, Edward remained there, watching the child's peaceful breathing. For the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking about business, investments, or financial conquests. His mind was entirely focused on this little girl who, in a matter of hours, had filled a void he hadn't even known existed. The next morning, Edward woke later than usual. His body was responding to the disease's advance, but there was also something different, a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He went down for breakfast and found Sophia already in the kitchen, chatting animatedly with Martha. Good morning, Daddy, she said, running to hug him. Edward returned the hug, inhaling the sweet scent of Sophia's clean hair. Martha had bathed the girl and found suitable clothes in a wardrobe she kept for nieces who occasionally visited. How did you sleep, sweetheart? Very well, the bed is as soft as a cloud. Sophia returned to the table, where Martha had prepared a breakfast worthy of a five-star hotel. Fresh fruits, assorted breads, natural juices, homemade cakes. Edward watched, fascinated, as Sophia observed each item on the table with reverence. She didn't pounce on the food like a starving child would. Instead, she savored each bite, closed her eyes to better taste it, thanked Martha repeatedly. "Sophia," Edward said, sitting beside her, "today we're going to do some important things. We'll go to the mall to buy you clothes. Then we need to go to the county clerk's office to start the adoption papers." The word adoption made Sophia's eyes fill with tears of joy. "Will it be official? Will I have your last name? If you want, you'll be Sophia Morgan." Sophia repeated the name several times, as if testing how it sounded. "Sophia Morgan, I like it." At the mall, Edward discovered a whole new world. He had never entered a children's clothing store, never watched a child pick out dresses and shoes. Sophia was careful with each item, asking the price of everything, worried about not spending too much of her new father's money. "Sweetheart," Edward said, kneeling to her level, "you don't need to worry about money. You can choose whatever you want." "But Grandma always said we should be careful with other people's money." Edward smiled. Sophia's grandmother had raised a girl with solid principles, even amidst poverty. "It's not other people's money anymore. It's ours, our families." The key word family made Sophia smile in a way that lit up her whole face. She chose simple but good quality clothes, always asking for Edward's opinion, who discovered he had surprisingly firm views on what looked good on his daughter. In the toy store, Edward expected Sophia to go wild, choosing everything in sight. Instead, she walked slowly down the aisles, gently touching the toys as if they were precious treasures. "Can I choose just one?" she asked. Edward laughed. "You can choose as many as you want." Sophia thought hard and finally chose a simple, brown-haired doll. "She looks like me," she explained, "and she looks like she needs a family too." At the county clerk's office, things got complicated. The clerk explained that adoption processes were complex, involving social workers, psychological evaluations, and adjustment periods. Edward felt time slipping through his fingers like sand. "Is there any way to expedite the process?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "In special cases, with medical or social justification," the clerk began. Edward made a decision that would change everything. He would have to reveal his condition, use his terminal illness as justification for the urgency. But that would also mean facing a reality he was trying to avoid. Time was running out, and soon Sophia would be an orphan again. The call came the next morning, interrupting the quiet breakfast Edward and Sophia were sharing. The name on the phone's display made Edward sigh heavily. Robert Morgan, his younger brother. "Hello, Rob," Edward answered, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Edward, what's this I hear? You adopted a kid? Out of the blue?" Rob's voice was laden with disbelief and something else Edward recognized immediately. Greed disguised as concern. Edward looked at Sophia, who was playing with her new doll at the table, pretending to feed it breakfast. "Can I call you later? Now's not a good time." "Not a good time. Edward, have you lost your mind completely? A street kid? You don't even like children." Edward felt his irritation grow. "People change, Rob. People change, but not overnight. You're sick. You're not thinking straight. This girl must have seen you have money and took advantage of your—" "Careful what you say," Edward interrupted, his voice growing dangerously low. Sophia looked up, sensing the tension in her new father's voice. Edward forced a smile for her and got up from the table, walking to his study. "Edward, be reasonable," Rob continued. "You have a company, an immense fortune. You can't make important decisions based on sentimentality. What guarantee do we have that this child wasn't coached by someone to take advantage of you? She's 6 years old, Rob. Exactly, and who's behind her? Who put her in your path? Did you think about that? Edward hadn't thought about it, and the seed of doubt Rob was planting found fertile ground in his business-oriented mind. His whole life had been built on suspicion, risk analysis, and distrust. That's how he protected himself in the business world. "I'm coming over this afternoon," Rob said. "We need to talk in person, and I'm bringing my lawyer." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is. If you're really determined to go through with this, at least let's do it right. Background checks, asset protection agreements, reversion clauses." Edward hung up the phone and sat heavily in his office armchair. The oxygen tank hissed softly as he took a deep breath, trying to process the conversation. Rob had touched old wounds, reactivated defenses Edward thought he had abandoned since finding Sophia. "Daddy?" Sophia's small voice brought him back to the present. She was standing at the study door holding her doll. "Are you okay? You look sad." Edward beckoned her over, and she approached, climbing onto his lap with the naturalness of a child who already felt safe. He hugged her again, inhaling that sweet, clean scent that was becoming his favorite perfume. "Sometimes people don't understand when we do things from the heart," he said carefully. Sophia nodded seriously. "Grandma used to say some people only know how to count money, but they don't know how to count love." The profound simplicity of the observation struck Edward like a bolt of lightning. Sophia, at 6, had captured Rob's essence better than he himself had managed in decades of family life. Later that day, Rob arrived accompanied by Mr. Silverman, his personal lawyer. Edward watched them from the window. Rob, at 48, still maintained the athletic build and charming smile he had always used to get what he wanted. Mr. Silverman was a thin, nervous man, carrying a briefcase full of documents that seemed to weigh more than he did. "Sophia," Edward said, "how about you go play in the garden with Martha? Daddy needs to talk to some boring people." Sophia giggled. "Do boring people really exist?" "Unfortunately, yes." She gave him a kiss on the cheek and ran off, her doll dangling from her arm. Edward watched her go, feeling a mixture of pride and protectiveness he hadn't known existed. When Rob and Mr. Silverman entered the study, Edward was ready for battle. "Edward!" Rob opened his arms theatrically. "You look terrible, brother. This illness is consuming you." "Thanks for your concern," Edward replied dryly. Mr. Silverman opened his briefcase and began spreading documents on the desk. "Mr. Morgan, we've prepared some precautionary documents. Nothing against the child, of course, but necessary protections for your estate." Edward examined the papers. Prenuptial agreements adapted for adoption, clauses limiting Sophia's access to the inheritance until she was 30, background checks that would extend to anyone who had contact with the girl. "You've turned an adoption into a business transaction," Edward said, pushing the papers back. "That's exactly what it is," Rob exploded. "You think love comes free? This girl appeared out of nowhere, at the exact moment you're most vulnerable, and you don't see a problem with that." At that moment, Sophia appeared at the garden window, waving cheerfully at Edward. She had found a butterfly and was trying to show it to him. Her smile was genuine, without a trace of malice or material interest. "Just look at her," Rob said, following Edward's gaze. "Calculated from a young age, I bet she knows exactly how much you're worth." Edward stood up slowly, leaning on his oxygen tank. "You have 10 seconds to get out of my house." "Edward, be reasonable." 5 seconds. Rob and Mr. Silverman quickly gathered their documents. "This isn't over, Edward," Rob said at the door. "You're sick. You're not in a condition to make important decisions. If necessary, I'll challenge your mental capacity in court." When they left, Edward sat down again, feeling the weight of the threat. Rob wasn't bluffing. He really could challenge the adoption, claim mental incapacity, drag the process through the courts. And Edward only had 6 days of life left. That night, Edward couldn't sleep. He remained seated in the armchair in Sophia's room, watching her sleep peacefully, hugging her doll. The girl's quiet breathing contrasted with the storm brewing in his mind. Rob's words echoed like a curse. "You're not in a condition to make important decisions." Around 3 in the morning, Edward felt a more intense shortness of breath than usual. He got up carefully so as not to wake Sophia and went to his room, increasing the oxygen flow. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he faced his own mortality with brutal clarity. 5 days, maybe fewer. How could he ensure Sophia would be protected when he was gone? Rob had resources, lawyers, and worse, plausible legal reasons to question such a sudden adoption. And if he managed to reverse the process, Sophia would be back on the streets, or worse, in an orphanage, where she would be just another number. The next morning, Edward decided to be honest with himself and with Sophia, at least partially. During breakfast, he chose his words carefully. "Sophia, you know Daddy is sick, don't you?" The girl stopped eating and looked at him with those large, expressive eyes. "I know. That's why you need that tube to breathe." "It's a little more serious than it looks," Edward said, surprised by his own courage. "The doctors said I might not get better." Sophia processed the information with adult-like seriousness. "Are you going to die?" The direct question, asked with the cruel innocence of children, hit Edward like a punch. "It's possible." Sophia was silent for a long moment, then got off her chair and approached him. "Can I give you a hug to make you feel better?" Edward pulled her onto his lap, feeling tears he hadn't shed in decades begin to form. "Your hugs are already helping me a lot." "Grandma got sick too," Sophia said, resting her head on Edward's chest. "But before she left, she taught me many important things. If you leave too, can you teach me important things?" Edward could barely speak. "What kind of things?" "How to be strong, how to take care of myself, how to remember I'm loved even when I'm alone." In that moment, Edward understood that he wasn't just saving Sophia, she was also saving him, teaching him about unconditional love, about the beauty of simplicity, about what truly mattered in life. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Dr. Carter, Edward's physician. "Mr. Morgan, I need to see you. Today, the latest tests show a faster progression of the disease. It would be best if you came to the hospital." Edward looked at Sophia, who was still on his lap, now playing with the buttons on his shirt. "I can't go to the hospital today, doctor. I have important commitments." "Mr. Morgan, you need to understand the gravity." "I understand perfectly. But today, my daughter and I are going to the zoo." Edward hung up before the doctor could protest. Sophia lifted her head, surprised. "Are we going to the zoo? Really? Really? And afterward we'll get ice cream and do whatever you want." Sophia jumped off his lap, radiant. "Can I choose which animals we see first?" "You can choose everything." As Sophia ran to get ready, Edward made a decision that surprised even himself. If he only had a few days left, he wouldn't spend a minute in hospitals or lawyers' offices. He would spend every second with Sophia, creating memories she could carry forever. At the zoo, Edward discovered the world through a child's eyes. Sophia was mesmerized by the elephants, laughed at the monkeys' antics, marveled at the flamingos' colors. She asked questions about every animal, invented stories about their lives, and insisted Edward take pictures of her with each one. "So, when you get better, we can look at the pictures and remember our special day," she explained. Edward took dozens of photos, knowing they would be precious not for him, but for Sophia when she grew up. In every photo, the girl's smile was genuine, radiant, free of any worry or material interest. At the zoo snack bar, Sophia ordered a simple chocolate ice cream. Edward, accustomed to the world's finest restaurants, found that watching Sophia savor that simple ice cream was more satisfying than any gourmet meal he had ever experienced. "Daddy," Sophia said, licking her ice cream, "are you happy?" "Very happy. Why?" "Because your eyes are sparkling. Grandma said that when your eyes sparkle, it's because your heart is happy." Edward laughed, a genuine laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. "Your eyes are sparkling too." "It's because I've never been this happy in my whole life." On the way home, Sophia fell asleep in the back seat of the taxi, exhausted from so much excitement. Edward watched her sleep, memorizing every detail of that angelic face. If he only had a few days to be a father, he would be the best father he could be. But when they arrived home, they found an unpleasant surprise waiting for them. Rob was in the living room, accompanied by a woman in a suit Edward didn't know. "Edward," Rob said, standing up, "this is Ms. Helen Santos, a social worker. She needs to ask some questions about the girl's situation." Edward felt his heart sink. Rob had involved the system. He was using bureaucracy to question the adoption. The battle for Sophia's custody was just beginning, and Edward knew he was at a clear disadvantage, a single, terminally ill man against an entire legal system that would question his ability to raise a child. Ms. Helen Santos was a woman of about 40, with her hair in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to dissect every detail around her. She carried a bulky folder and a digital recorder, clear signs that this would not be an informal conversation. "Mr. Morgan," she said in a professional voice, "I need to assess the conditions of this adoption. I received a report indicating possible irregularities in the process." Edward looked at Rob with barely concealed anger. Sophia, still sleepy from the outing, clung to Edward's leg, instinctively sensing something was wrong. "What kind of irregularities?" Edward asked, keeping his voice calm for Sophia's sake. "A precipitous adoption without an adequate adjustment period, lack of prior psychological evaluation, and..." She consulted her papers. "Questions about your physical and mental capacity to care for a child." Sophia looked up, confused. "Daddy, why is the lady saying those hard words?" Edward knelt beside her. "Sophia, the lady needs to ask some questions to understand how happy we are together. How about you go play in your room while we talk?" "No," Miss Santos interrupted. "I need to speak with the child as well. It's part of the protocol." Edward felt a wave of fierce protectiveness. "She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand these legal matters." Children understand more than we imagine," the social worker replied. "Sophia, can you sit here with me?" Sophia looked at Edward, who nodded reluctantly. She sat on the edge of the sofa, still clutching her doll, her feet swinging nervously. "Sophia, how long have you known Mr. Morgan?" "A few days," Sophia answered honestly. "And before that, where did you live?" "On the street, after Grandma died." Mrs. Santos made notes. "Did you ask him for food?" "I did." Sophia didn't seem to understand why this was important. "And did he offer for you to live here?" "He asked if I wanted to be his daughter." Sophia's face lit up at the memory. "No one ever wanted to be my daddy before." "Sophia," the social worker's voice softened, "do you know that Mr. Morgan has a lot of money?" Edward tensed, but Sophia seemed genuinely confused by the question. "Money? Yes, this big house, pretty clothes, toys. Did you know that when you asked him for food?" Sophia shook her head. "I just wanted food. I've been hungry for a long time. And now that you know he's rich, do you like him more?" Sophia frowned as if the question didn't make sense. I like him because he's my daddy, because he hugs me, tells me stories, and his eyes sparkle when he smiles at me. Ms. Santos seemed surprised by the answer. You don't like the things he buys for you? I do, Sophia said simply, but I'd like him even if he didn't buy anything. Grandma didn't have money, but I loved her very much. Edward felt his chest swell with pride. Sophia, with her childlike honesty, was dismantling all suspicions of material interest. Mr. Morgan, Miss Santos turned to him. May I speak with you privately? Edward asked Sophia to go play in the garden with Martha. When they were alone, the social worker got straight to the point. You're ill, terminally ill, according to the information I've received. Edward looked at Rob, who avoided his gaze. It's true. And you thought it appropriate to adopt a child knowing you'll leave her orphaned again soon? The question hit Edward like a bullet. It was the exact same doubt that had tormented him since he made the decision. I thought a few days of real love would be better than a lifetime of abandonment, he said quietly. But did you consider the trauma this will cause the child? She's already lost her grandmother. Now she'll get attached to you and lose you too. Edward stood up, walking to the window where he could see Sophia playing in the garden. She had found a butterfly and was trying to make her doll talk to it. Ms. Santos, he said without turning, do you have children? I do. 2. If you knew, you only had a week with them, would you choose to spend that week showing them love, or would you distance yourself to prevent them from suffering your departure? Ms. Santos was silent for a long moment. It's different. My children already know me. They have a solid emotional foundation. Sophia had nothing, absolutely nothing. Edward turned to her. Now she has someone who loves her unconditionally, someone who would do anything to protect her. Isn't that worth a week? And afterwards, when you die, does she go back to the street? No. Edward opened a drawer and pulled out documents he had prepared the night before. They've established a trust fund that will guarantee Sophia's education, housing, and care until she's 18. After that, she'll receive an inheritance that will support her for life. Rob spoke for the first time. Money doesn't replace a stable father figure. And what's your proposal, Rob? Edward turned to his brother. That I abandon her now, that she goes back to the streets, that she be placed with a suitable family through the proper channels. In an adoption line that could take years, moving from foster family to foster family? Miss Santos interrupted the argument. I need more time to assess the situation. Until then, Sophia will be placed in temporary state custody. No. The word came from Edward with a force that surprised everyone. She stays with me. Mr. Morgan, it's not a choice. It's standard procedure in questionable cases. There's nothing questionable about the love I feel for my daughter. Ms. Santos sighed. I have 20 years of experience, Mr. Morgan. I've seen many situations that seemed like true love turn out to be other things. I need to protect the child. At that moment, Sophia ran in through the door, holding a flower she had picked in the garden. Daddy, this is for you. She offered the small yellow flower with a radiant smile. Edward accepted the flower, and Sophia noticed he looked sad. Why are you sad? Isn't the flower pretty? The flower is perfect, sweetheart. Sophia turned to Ms. Santos. Miss, can you make my daddy happy again? He was happy at the zoo. The child's innocent question created a heavy silence in the room. Ms. Santos looked at Sophia, then at Edward, clearly torn between her professional protocol and what her eyes were seeing. I need more time, she said finally, gathering her documents. I'll be back tomorrow with the decision. When she left, Edward hugged Sophia, knowing it might be one of the last hugs they could share as father and daughter. That night, Edward couldn't hide his anxiety from Sophia. During dinner, she watched him push food around his plate, the oxygen tank hissing more frequently than usual. "Daddy, are you worried about the lady who came today?" Edward tried to smile. "A little." "Is she going to take me away?" The direct question made Edward choke. How could he lie to those trusting eyes? "I'm going to fight to make sure that doesn't happen." Sophia got down from her chair and approached him. "Can I tell you a secret?" Edward nodded, pulling her onto his lap. "I always knew you were very sick," she whispered in his ear. Edward tensed. "What do you mean?" "The first day, when you were breathing hard near me, I recognized it. Grandma made the same little noises before she went to heaven." Edward felt the world spin. "And even so, you wanted to stay with me." Sophia looked at him with a seriousness that didn't belong to a 6-year-old. "Daddy, do you think I asked you for food by chance?" "What do you mean?" "I'd been on that street for 3 days. Lots of people passed by, some even gave me food. But when I saw you with that tube and that sad face, I knew." "Knew what?" "That you needed me as much as I needed you." Edward felt tears stream down his face. "Sweetheart." "Grandma taught me something before she died," Sophia continued. "She said that sometimes God sends angels disguised as regular people to take care of those who need it most. I think you're my angel, and I'm yours." At that moment, the phone rang. Edward hesitated to answer, but Sophia insisted. "Answer it, Daddy. It might be important." It was Ms. Santos, and her voice was different, less formal. "Mr. Morgan, I need to see you urgently. Something important has happened." "Is it about Sophia?" "It's about both of you. Can I come over now?" 30 minutes later, Ms. Santos arrived, accompanied by an elderly woman Edward didn't know. The stranger had grey hair and kind eyes, much like Sophia's. "Sophia," Mrs. Santos said softly, "this lady has something important to tell you." The elderly woman knelt to Sophia's level, who hid behind Edward's legs. "My dear," the woman said with a trembling voice, "I am Rose, your Grandma Mary's sister." Sophia's eyes widened. "Grandma had a sister?" "She did. We argued many years ago over something silly, and we lost touch. I only found out about Mary's death when I saw her name in the newspaper obituary." Rose wiped her tears. "I've been looking for you for weeks, child. The neighbors said you had disappeared after the funeral." Edward felt the ground fall out from under him. Sophia had family. Blood family. "I tried to find you," Rose continued. "I went to the police, to orphanages, to shelters. This morning, they finally contacted me, saying a social worker was investigating your situation." Ms. Santos addressed Edward. "Rose is a retired teacher, owns her own home, has excellent references. Legally, as Sophia's closest living relative, she has priority for custody." Edward felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. He looked at Sophia, who seemed confused and scared. But Mrs. Santos continued, "Before making any decisions, Rose wanted to see Sophia's current situation for herself." Rose stood up and addressed Edward. "Sir, I know you must hate me right now, but I need to see with my own eyes if my niece is being well cared for." Edward nodded, unable to speak. He watched Rose examine the surroundings, noticed Sophia's new clothes, the toys, the way the girl clung to him. "Sophia," Rose said gently, "do you remember me? I used to visit your grandma sometimes when you were a baby." Sophia shook her head, but moved a little closer. "Your grandma talked about you a lot in the letters we exchanged," Rose continued. She said you were the most special girl in the world. Grandma wrote letters to you? Sophia asked. She did, and she always said that if anything happened to her, I should take care of you. Edward felt life slipping through his fingers. Not only was he losing Sophia to his approaching death, but to someone who had more right to her than he ever would. But then something unexpected happened. Sophia turned to Rose and asked, "Do you want to be my great aunt?" Rose smiled. "Of course, dear. And can he still be my daddy?" Rose looked at Edward, surprised. "Dear, if I take you to live with me—" "I don't want to go," Sophia said firmly. "I want to stay with my daddy." "But, sweetheart, I'm your real family." Sophia thought for a moment, then said something that left everyone speechless. "Grandma always said family isn't just about who has the same blood. Family is who truly loves us." She looked at Edward. "He truly loves me." Rose sat down heavily, clearly emotional. "Your father is sick, isn't he? Very sick?" Sophia nodded. "But while he's here, I want to stay with him, and when he goes to heaven to meet Grandma, then you can take care of me." Edward couldn't believe Sophia's maturity. She had found a solution that not even the adults had thought of. Rose looked at Edward for a long moment. "How many days did the doctors give you?" "Originally, a week. Today is the 4th day. And what do you plan to do in the remaining days?" "Love my daughter the best I can." Rose stood up and extended her hand to Edward. "Then we have a deal. I'll stay here to get to know Sophia better and help where needed. When the time comes, she won't be alone." Miss Santos, who had watched the entire scene in silence, finally spoke. "This might be the most unconventional solution I've ever witnessed, but also the most humane." Sophia ran to hug Edward. "Now I have a daddy and a great aunt. We're a real family." Edward hugged Sophia, looking at Rose with infinite gratitude. Against all odds, a solution had emerged. Sophia wouldn't be alone when he was gone, but she also wouldn't be separated from him in the precious days that remained. For the first time since his diagnosis, Edward felt something akin to peace. In the following days, Edward's mansion transformed into a true home for the first time in decades. Rose settled into the guest room next to Sophia's and quickly established a routine that brought order and warmth to the house that had always been cold and silent. Edward watched, fascinated, as Rose interacted with Sophia. There was a maternal naturalness about her that he would never possess, but he also realized that his relationship with the girl was unique and irreplaceable. Sophia treated them differently. With Rose, she was more spontaneous, asked questions about her grandmother, listened to family stories. With Edward, she was more protective, noticed when he was tired, brought him water without him asking. "She senses you need her," Rose explained one morning as they had coffee together. Sophia was still asleep. "It's a maternal instinct even, though she's so young." "And is that good or bad?" Edward asked, adjusting his oxygen flow. "It's love," Rose said simply. "And love is never bad, even when it hurts." Edward had begun to understand that Rose wasn't just a convenient solution for Sophia's future. She was a wise woman who had lost her husband 5 years ago and had no children of her own. Mary, Sophia's grandmother, had been her only close family, and she carried the guilt of not having reconciled with her sister before her death. "Why did you two fight?" Edward asked one afternoon as they watched Sophia play in the garden with Rose. "Pride," Rose admitted. "Mary wanted to lend me money when I was going through financial difficulties. I felt humiliated, said terrible things, and neither of us had the courage to take the first step toward reconciliation. And now I know that 10 years of silence were worth far less than an apology." Rose looked at Edward. Sometimes pride robs us of what's most precious in life. Edward understood she was also talking about him, about the relationships he had sacrificed, the family he had never built, because he was always focused on proving his worth through material success. That afternoon, Rob appeared again, but this time his presence didn't bring the usual tension. Rose greeted him with the firm courtesy of an experienced teacher, and Edward realized his brother was disarmed before this small but determined woman. "So, you three are going to play family?" Rob said with his usual sarcasm. "We're not playing," Rose replied calmly. "We are being a family." Rob turned to Edward. "Don't you think you're complicating things even more? Now you have an elderly woman getting attached to the girl too. Rose is Sophia's great-aunt. She has more right to her than any of us." "Exactly my point. Why don't you just let the woman take the child and end this situation?" Sophia, who was playing nearby, overheard the conversation and approached. "Uncle Rob, why don't you like me?" Rob was speechless. Sophia stared at him with the direct honesty of children, without malice, just genuine curiosity. It's not that I don't like you." "Is it because you're afraid I'll take Daddy's money?" Edward tried to intervene, but Rose stopped him with a gesture, interested in Rob's response. "It's more complicated than that," Rob said, clearly uncomfortable. "Grandma always said that when someone is mad at us for no reason, it's because they're afraid of something," Sophia said. "What are you afraid of?" Rob looked at Edward, then at Rose, finally at Sophia. For a moment his defenses seemed to crumble. "I'm afraid my brother will be tricked," he said, and for the first time he sounded sincere. "Tricked how?" "That someone will take advantage of him because he's sick and alone." Sophia considered this seriously. "Do you think I'll hurt my daddy?" "I don't know you. I don't know you." Sophia extended her small hand to Rob. "Want to get to know me? I can show you my toys." Rob looked at the outstretched hand, as if it were a snake. Edward was ready to intervene, expecting his brother to cruelly reject the child. But something unexpected happened. Rob took Sophia's hand. "All right, you can show me your toys." As Sophia led Rob to her room, Rose whispered to Edward, "Children have a special power to disarm even the hardest hearts." In Sophia's room, Rob was bombarded with stories about each toy, each outfit, each adventure she had experienced in the past few days. Sophia showed him the zoo pictures, told him about the ice cream, about how Edward had taught her to ride a bike in the garden. "And this one," she said, picking up a drawing she had made, "is our family portrait." Rob examined the drawing. There were 4 figures, Sophia in the center, Edward with his oxygen tank, Rose with a big smile, and surprisingly a 4th figure beside them. "Who is this?" Rob asked, pointing to the extra figure. "It's you," Sophia said naturally. "You're a family too." Rob was silent for a long moment, looking at the drawing. "I'm not very kind to you all. Grandma said angry people just need more love," Sophia said. "Do you want more love?" It was the simplest and most devastating question Rob had ever heard. He sat heavily on Sophia's little bed, holding the drawing. "I don't know if I deserve it." "Everybody deserves it," Sophia said, climbing onto the bed and sitting beside him. "Daddy taught me that." When Edward and Rose went up to see how the introduction was going, they found Rob listening to Sophia tell a story, both sitting on the bed, sharing a picture book. Edward felt something stir in his chest. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild. Bridges. Maybe Sophia's love was contagious enough to heal old wounds between brothers. "Rob," Edward said softly. His brother looked up, and Edward saw tears that hadn't appeared in decades. "She put me in the family drawing," Rob said, showing. "The paper? Because you are family," Edward said, extending his hand. Rob took it, and for the first time in years, the brothers hugged. Sophia clapped her hands, radiant. Now we're a real family, complete. Edward looked around the room, Sophia jumping with joy, Rose wiping tears of emotion, Rob holding a child's, drawing as if it were a treasure. In a matter of days, this little girl had accomplished what he hadn't managed in decades, created a family united by love. The sixth day arrived with a golden morning that seemed to bless this unlikely family. Edward woke up feeling surprisingly well, with more energy than he had experienced since his diagnosis. Sophia was in his bed, sleeping beside him, a practice that had become routine in recent nights when she sensed he was weaker. "Daddy," she whispered, opening her eyes. "How are you today?" "Better," Edward said, and it wasn't a lie. "Much better." Sophia smiled and snuggled closer to him. "I asked God to give you a special day today, and it looks like he answered your prayer." They went down for breakfast hand in hand and found Rose and Rob already in the kitchen. Rob's presence was still surreal for Edward. His brother had spent the night at the mansion, in the room he had occupied in childhood, and for the first time in decades they had talked like family. "Good morning, family," Sophia said cheerfully, greeting each of them with a kiss. Rob smiled, a genuine smile Edward hadn't seen in years. "Good morning, Princess." During breakfast, Sophia made an important announcement. "Today I want to do something special for everyone." "What do you have in mind?" Rose asked. "I want to cook for you. Grandma taught me how to make cookies." Edward opened his mouth to protest. Sophia was too young to use the oven, but Rose silenced him with a look. "What a wonderful idea. I'll help you." What followed was one of the happiest mornings Edward had ever experienced. The kitchen turned into a sweet battlefield, with flour scattered everywhere, Sophia directing operations like a determined chef, Rose and Rob following her instructions with feigned seriousness. Edward watched from the kitchen table, laughing until his chest hurt, a good pain, different from the one his illness brought. His oxygen tank was there, but it seemed less necessary at that moment. "Daddy, you have to try the batter," Sophia insisted, offering a smeared spoon. Edward tasted it and made an exaggerated face of approval. "It's the best batter I've ever tasted." "It's because it was made with love," Sophia said, repeating a phrase she had clearly learned from her grandmother. Rob, covered in flour from head to toe, was laughing in a way Edward hadn't seen since childhood. "When was the last time we did something like this together?" he asked. Edward thought. "Never. We've never done anything like this." "So we're making new memories," Rose said, shaping cookies with Sophia. While the cookies baked, Sophia decided they should have a picnic in the garden. Martha helped prepare sandwiches, Rose made lemonade, and Rob, surprisingly, suggested they build a makeshift fort with sheets. "Do you know how to build forts?" Sophia asked, impressed. "Your daddy and I used to make them when we were little," Rob said, looking at Edward, "in the backyard of our first house." Edward remembered. They had been children once, before life turned them into adversaries in the race for success. "Can you teach me?" Sophia asked. Rob spent the whole afternoon teaching Sophia how to tie knots, stretch ropes, and build a sturdy fort. Edward watched, marveling at the patience his brother showed, the natural kindness he had hidden for so many years. By late afternoon, they were all sitting in the improvised fort, eating slightly burnt but delicious cookies, drinking lemonade, and telling stories. Sophia was at the center, surrounded by her 3 favorite adults, radiant with happiness. "Tell a story from when you were little," she requested. Edward and Rob exchanged glances. There were few happy moments to tell. Their childhood had been marked by poverty, by their single mother's struggle to raise 2 sons. There was one Christmas. Edward began slowly, when we had no money for presents. Rob nodded, remembering. Our mom was so sad, but we decided to make presents for each other, Edward continued. I made a wooden toy car for Rob out of scraps of wood I found. And I made a storybook for Edward, Rob said. I drew and wrote it all myself. Sophia listened with shining eyes. And did you like the presents? They were the best presents we ever got, the two brothers said at the same time, then laughed at their synchronization. Our mom cried when she saw them, Edward recalled. She said we were the most special sons in the world. What happened to her? Sophia asked gently. She died when we were teenagers, Rob said sadly. And after that, we drifted apart. Each went his own way. Sophia thought for a moment, then said something that touched everyone's heart. I think she'd be happy to see you two together again. Edward felt tears stream down his face. I think so too. And I think Grandma is happy too, Sophia continued. In heaven, watching our family become complete. Rose wiped her own eyes. Your grandmother always dreamed of seeing the family reunited. When night came, none of them wanted the day to end. Sophia had fallen asleep in the fort, exhausted from so much happiness. Edward carried her into the house, noticing he could do so without much effort, something that would have been impossible a few days earlier. You're better, Rob observed. Really better. I am, Edward admitted. I don't understand it, but I am. Rose, who had been watching Edward all day, made an observation that made them think, sometimes the body responds to what the heart feels, and your heart is lighter. That night, for the first time since his diagnosis, Edward went to sleep without thinking about death. He thought only of the family he had found, the love he had finally known, the little girl who had transformed his life in a matter of days. But he didn't know that, in the room next door, Sophia was awake, whispering fervent prayers to a grandmother in heaven and a God she believed in with all the faith of her small heart. Please, she whispered, let my daddy stay with me a little longer. We're so happy together. The 7th day should have been his last. According to the doctors, Edward should have been in his final throes, perhaps already gone. Instead, he woke at 6 in the morning, without an alarm clock, feeling more refreshed than he had in months. The oxygen tank was beside the bed, but Edward realized he hadn't needed it during the night. He stood up carefully, testing his strength. His legs held firm. His breathing, though still not perfect, was significantly better. He walked to the window and opened the curtains, letting the morning sun bathe the room. Daddy? Sophia appeared at the door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. You're standing? I am, Edward said, smiling, and feeling very well. Sophia ran to him, and Edward lifted her into his arms without difficulty, something he hadn't been able to do for weeks. She hugged him tightly, inhaling his scent. My prayers worked, she whispered in his ear. I knew they would. Edward put her down and knelt to her level. Sophia, you understand I'm still sick, right? That this might just be a good day? No, she said, with the absolute conviction of childhood. You're getting better. I can feel it. How can you feel it? Your eyes, they don't have that dark sadness anymore, and your hands aren't cold anymore. She took his hands and warmed them between her own small ones. Love is healing you. Edward wanted to argue, to explain about fluctuations in medical conditions, about false hopes. But looking into those eyes full of unwavering faith, he decided for the first time in his life to simply believe. At breakfast, Rose and Rob also noticed Edward's evident improvement. He ate with appetite for the first time in weeks, laughed without forcing it, participated in the conversation without pausing for breath. We need to go to the doctor, Rose said, worried and hopeful at the same time. No, Edward said. Not today. Today I want to enjoy every minute of feeling well. But Edward... Rose, if I'm going to get bad news, I'd rather get it tomorrow. If I'm going to get good news, it can wait a day. Sophia clapped her hands. Then today is a total fun day. Rob, who had spent the morning observing his brother with growing amazement, finally spoke. Edward, this is unbelievable. You look like a different man. I am a different man, Edward said, looking at Sophia. I'm a father. The morning was dedicated to activities Edward hadn't done in years. They played soccer in the yard. Edward managed to run, albeit slowly. They played hide and seek. Edward hid behind trees without needing his oxygen tank. Sophia taught everyone a dance she had invented, and Edward managed to keep up with all the movements. You're normal, Sophia exclaimed during the dance. Just like other daddies. The observation touched Edward deeply. For the first time, he was simply a father playing with his daughter, without the shadow of death hovering over every moment. In the afternoon, Edward made a decision that surprised everyone. Let's visit Dr. Carter. But you said you didn't want to go to the doctor today, Rose reminded him. I changed my mind. I want him to see how well I am. I want him to confirm what I already know. What do you already know? Rob asked. Edward looked at Sophia, who was playing with her doll on the sofa. That miracles happen. At Dr. Carter's office, the reception was one of utter shock. The receptionist had to double-check Edward's name, unable to believe that this healthy, rosy-cheeked man, standing without respiratory aid, was the same terminal patient who had left the hospital a week earlier. Dr. Carter entered the room and stopped at the door. Edward, is that really you? It's me, Doctor. But how? Where's your oxygen tank? In the car. I haven't needed it today. Dr. Carter approached, examining Edward with eyes that couldn't believe what they were seeing. You should be... according to our calculations, I should be dead, Edward said calmly. I know. I need to run some tests, urgently. The tests lasted 2 hours. X-rays, CT scans, blood tests, respiratory tests. While Edward underwent the procedures, Sophia waited in the waiting room with Rose and Rob, entertaining other patients with stories about her wonderful father. When Dr. Carter called them all into his office, his face was pale. I have no medical explanation for what I'm about to say, he began. Edward's tumors have shrunk dramatically. Some have disappeared completely. His lung function has improved by 60%. His blood markers are almost normal. Complete silence filled the room. Does that mean he's not going to die? Sophia asked with childlike frankness. Dr. Carter looked at her, then at Edward. It means that for some reason medicine can't explain, your father is recovering. Sophia jumped from her chair and ran to Edward. I told you my prayers would work. Rob was in shock. Is this possible, Doctor? Statistically? No. I've seen spontaneous remissions, but never this rapid or this complete. Dr. Carter turned to Edward. What changed in your life this week? Edward looked at Sophia, who was on his lap, radiant. Everything, absolutely everything. Any alternative treatments, new medication? Edward hesitated, knowing how it would sound. Just love. A lot of love. Dr. Carter made notes, clearly struggling between scientific skepticism and the evidence before his eyes. I'm going to refer you for a full battery of tests with specialists. We need to monitor this closely. Doctor, Rose said timidly, do you believe in miracles? Dr. Carter, a man who had dedicated his life to science, looked at Edward hugging Sophia, then at Rose and Rob, smiling through tears. Ma'am, he said slowly, this week I've started to believe. On the way home, Sophia hummed a song she had made up about daddies who get well. Edward drove, something he hadn't done in months, feeling the wind on his face from the open window. "Daddy," Sophia said from the back seat, "can we have a lot of time together now?" Edward looked at her in the rearview mirror. "It seems so, sweetheart, a lot of time. Enough time for you to teach me to ride my bike properly, and take me to school and meet my friends. And enough time for all that and much more." Sophia sighed happily. "I knew God wouldn't separate us. We're a perfect family." Edward smiled, finally believing that perhaps she was right. A week after the appointment with Dr. Carter, Edward was officially in remission. The battery of tests confirmed what had seemed impossible. The man who should have died was not only alive, but recovering extraordinarily. The news spread through the hospital like a medical phenomenon, and Edward found himself the center of attention he didn't desire. "Daddy, why do so many people want to talk to you?" Sophia asked as they left another medical appointment. "Because the doctors were surprised I got better," Edward explained, adjusting Sophia's small hand in his. "But I wasn't surprised," she said matter-of-factly. "I knew you were going to get well." Edward smiled. Sophia's unwavering faith had become his source of strength in moments when even he doubted his own recovery. At home, life had taken on a new, wonderful rhythm. Rose had decided to stay permanently, becoming the grandmother Sophia had never had in the family Edward had always wanted. Rob visited almost daily, rediscovering the joy of being an uncle and reconnecting with the brother he thought he had lost forever. But with new life came new challenges. Edward now faced the reality of being a single father to a 6-year-old, without the urgency of imminent death, but with all the real responsibilities of parenthood. "Sophia needs to start school," Rose said one morning while the girl played in the garden. Edward felt a pang in his chest. He had grown accustomed to having Sophia constantly nearby, and the idea of being separated from her, even for a few hours, made him anxious. "Isn't she happy here? We can hire private tutors." "Edward," Rose touched his arm gently, "she needs to be around other children, make friends her own age, have a normal life." "Normal?" Edward repeated the word as if it were foreign. "I don't even know what normal is anymore." Rob, who had arrived for breakfast, another new family tradition, overheard the conversation. "Normal is having a routine, responsibilities, age-appropriate challenges. Sophia is a bright child. She needs educational stimulation." Edward knew they were right, but the prospect of leaving Sophia in an environment he didn't fully control terrified him. What if something happened to her? What if other children didn't treat her well? What if she felt abandoned? "Daddy looks worried again," Sophia observed, entering the kitchen with dirt on her hands from the garden. "We were just talking about you starting school," Edward said, trying to sound casual. Sophia's eyes lit up. "A real school, with other kids. Would you like that?" "Very much. Grandma always said I was very smart and would like studying." Sophia paused. "But will you miss me?" Edward knelt to her level. "I'll miss you every second. We're apart, and I'll miss you. But in the afternoon, I'll come back and tell you everything I learned." The simplicity with which Sophia faced the situation made Edward realize his own anxieties were more about his fears as an inexperienced father than about his daughter's actual needs. The following week, they visited 3 private schools. Sophia was fascinated by everything: colorful classrooms, libraries full of books, playgrounds with toys she had never seen. At each school, she asked intelligent questions, chatted easily with teachers and principals, and showed a thirst for knowledge that impressed everyone. "She's an exceptional child," said the principal of the last school they visited, a Mrs. Davis, very mature for her age, yet she preserves all the natural curiosity and joy of childhood. Edward chose that school, a small, welcoming institution where classes were small and individual attention was a priority. On the first day of school, he was more nervous than Sophia. "Daddy, are you going to cry?" she asked, packing her new backpack. "Maybe a little." Sophia hugged him tightly. "You don't need to cry. I'm your daughter forever, even when I'm not by your side." Edward walked her to the classroom door, watched her confidently introduce herself to the teacher and greet the other children with her radiant smile. When she waved to him from the window, Edward had to turn away so he wouldn't cry in front of the other parents. "First time dropping off your daughter at school?" asked a mother who had noticed his emotion. "First time for everything?" Edward admitted, "I've only been a father for a few weeks." The woman smiled with understanding. "The hardest part of being a parent is learning to let your children fly with their own wings." During the 6 hours Sophia was at school, Edward couldn't concentrate on anything. He called the school 3 times to see if she was okay. Rose and Rob laughed at his anxiety but understood. "You're discovering that true love includes constant worry," Rose observed. When Sophia left school, she ran to Edward with open arms, overflowing with stories to tell. "Daddy, I made 3 friends. The teacher said I read very well, and there's a giant library. Can I bring books home?" In the car, Sophia chattered non-stop about every moment of the day. Edward realized his daughter had blossomed in this new environment, and his worry had been unfounded. "Sophia," he said during dinner, "you were very brave today." "You too, Daddy. It must have been hard to leave me there." Edward laughed. Sometimes. Sophia showed an emotional perception that surprised him. "It was, but it was worth it to see how happy you were." "Do you know what the best part of school was?" Sophia asked. "What?" "When the kids asked about my family, I could talk about my daddy, Aunt Rose, Uncle Rob, and Grandma, who's in heaven watching over us all." Sophia smiled. "I have the most special family in the whole school." That night, as he put Sophia to bed, Edward reflected on how completely his life had changed. A few months earlier, he was a lonely, bitter man, focused only on accumulating wealth. Now, he was the father of an extraordinary girl, had a loving family, and for the first time, understood the true meaning of happiness. "Daddy," Sophia whispered in the dark. "Yes, sweetheart." "Do you think Grandma is proud of me?" Edward sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair. "I'm sure she is, and I'm very proud of you too. And I'm proud to have you as my daddy." Edward kissed Sophia's forehead, feeling a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. "Good night, sweetheart. I love you more than anything in the world." "I love you too, Daddy, forever and ever." When Sophia fell asleep, Edward watched her for a few minutes, still marveling at the miracle that was his life. He had learned that true love not only heals hearts, sometimes it literally saves lives. 3 months had passed since that first encounter on the grey street. Edward was officially cured, a word Dr. Carter still pronounced with incredulity, but which tests confirmed month after month. Sophia had blossomed at school, becoming one of the most beloved and brightest students in her class. The family they had built seemed solid and happy. But that June morning, everything changed. Edward was in his office, reviewing company documents. He had gradually returned to work, discovering that his perspective on business had completely changed. Now he prioritized employees, social responsibility, sustainability. Profit still mattered, but it was no longer the sole objective. The phone rang. It was Sophia's school. "Mr. Morgan." The secretary's voice was tense. "You need to pick up Sophia urgently." Edward's heart raced. "What happened? Is she hurt?" No, sir, but she's very upset. There was an incident during recess. Edward dropped everything and rushed to the school. He found Sophia sitting in the principal's office, clutching her doll, tears streaming down her face. When she saw him, she ran into his arms. "Daddy, you came!" "Of course I did, sweetheart. What happened?" The principal, Mrs. Davis, explained the situation gently. Some older students made unpleasant comments about Sophia during recess. They said she didn't have a real family, that she'd been picked up off the street, that her father only adopted her out of pity. Edward felt a fierce anger rise in his chest. And what did the school do? The boys were punished, of course, but Sophia was very shaken. She cried for the rest of the period. Edward looked at Sophia, who had stopped crying but still seemed fragile. "Sweetheart, do you want to tell me what those boys said?" Sophia hesitated, then whispered, "They said I'm not your real daughter, that you only took me in because you felt sorry for me, that when you get tired of playing daddy, you'll send me away." The words hit Edward like daggers. He knelt to Sophia's level, holding her small face between his hands. "Sophia, look at me. Do you believe what those boys said?" Sophia shook her head, but her voice was uncertain. "No, but is it true you found me on the street?" "It's true." "And is it true I'm not your biological daughter?" Edward took a deep breath. This was the moment he had always known would come, when Sophia would question her origin, her story, the nature of their relationship. "It's true, you weren't born from my tummy like some children are. But Sophia..." He touched her chest over her heart. "You were born here, in my heart, and that makes you more my daughter than anything in the world. But why did you choose me? Why not a rich, pretty girl who already had a family?" Edward smiled through his own tears. "Because you were exactly the daughter my heart was looking for. Because when I saw you, I recognized we were from the same family, the family of people who need love and know how to give love." Sophia seemed to process this. "And you'll never send me away?" "Sophia Morgan," Edward said solemnly, "you are my daughter forever. There are no returns for daughters of the heart. There's no expiration date on a father's love. Even if I do something wrong, even if you do 1,000 things wrong, even if you fight with me, even if you grow up and rebel, even if you disappoint me, real daddies never give up on their children, and I am your real daddy." Sophia threw herself into his arms, and Edward hugged her tightly, feeling the tension. "Leave her small body. Can I say something to those boys tomorrow?" Sophia asked. "Of course. What do you want to say?" Sophia pulled back a little, and Edward saw a new determination in her eyes. "I want to tell them they're jealous because they don't have a daddy who loves them as much as mine loves me, and that real family isn't about who has the same blood, it's about who has the same love." Edward laughed, proud of his daughter's wisdom. "Do you want me to go with you to talk to them?" "No need. I know who I am. I know who my family is. And I know I'm loved." Sophia smiled. "Grandma always said that when we know who we are, other people's words can't hurt us." On the way home, Sophia was quieter than usual. Edward respected her silence, understanding she was processing not just the incident, but deeper questions about identity and belonging. At home, Rose and Rob were waiting. The school had called them too. Sophia told the whole story and finished with a declaration that touched everyone. "Today I understood something important. I'm not Sophia because I was adopted. I'm Sophia because I was chosen. And being chosen is much more special than being born." Rob approached Sophia. "Sophia, can I tell you a secret?" She nodded. "I was chosen to be your uncle too. I wasn't born an uncle. I became an uncle when I met you, and it's the best thing that's happened to me in years." Rose added, "And I chose to be your great aunt. I could have taken you away, but I chose to stay and be a family together." Sophia looked around the room at the three people she loved most in the world. "So, are we all chosen?" "All of us," Edward confirmed, "and we choose each other every day, again and again." That night, during their bedtime ritual, Sophia asked a question that showed her growing maturity. "Daddy, do you think my biological parents loved me?" Edward chose his words carefully. "I don't know who your biological parents were, sweetheart, but I know that if they knew you like I know you, they would love you as much as I do." "And why didn't they stay with me?" "Sometimes people can't take care of their children, even if they love them very much. It could be illness, poverty, problems they can't solve. It doesn't mean they didn't love them." Sophia thought for a moment. "So they gave me to Grandma because they wanted me to be taken care of." "Probably so. And Grandma raised me with love until she couldn't anymore." "Exactly. And then she asked you to find me and take care of me." Edward smiled. He didn't believe in divine intervention, but maybe that's exactly what happened. Sophia snuggled into his arms. "So I've had three families who loved me. The first one who gave me life, Grandma who raised me, and you who chose me. I'm a very lucky girl." Edward kissed her forehead, marveling once again at Sophia's ability to transform pain into gratitude, rejection into acceptance, questioning into certainty. "Yes, sweetheart, you are the luckiest girl in the world, and I am the luckiest daddy in the world. Forever, forever, and ever." When Sophia fell asleep, Edward watched her, reflecting on how that day had been a milestone. Sophia had faced her first major identity crisis and emerged stronger, more secure, more certain of who she was and where she belonged. It was the most emotionally tense moment they had faced as a family, and they had overcome it together with love, honesty, and unity. Edward knew other crises would come. It was part of life, part of growing up. But he also knew that together they could face anything. A year had passed since that encounter that changed everything. Edward was in his office, but not working on the cold numbers of the spreadsheets that once dominated his life. Instead, he was organizing preparations for a very special celebration, the first official anniversary of Sophia's adoption. The transformation in his company had been radical. Under his new leadership, it had become a benchmark in social responsibility, creating programs to support orphaned children, funding shelters, and establishing a permanent fund for vulnerable families. Edward had discovered that using his fortune to help others was infinitely more satisfying than simply accumulating it. "Daddy!" Sophia ran into the office, still in her school uniform, her hair flying and the smile that had become the light of his life. "Guess what happened today?" Edward lifted her into his arms, a gesture he never tired of, still marveling at his recovered strength. "Let me guess. You got an A in math again?" "Better than that." Sophia opened her backpack and pulled out a colorful paper. "The teacher chose my essay for the citywide contest." Edward examined the essay titled, "My Special Family." He read it in silence, his heart clenching with emotion at every line. Sophia had written about love that transcends blood, about second chances, about how families can be born from unexpected encounters. She ended with a sentence that brought tears to Edward's eyes. "I learned that real love can cure any illness, even the illness of having an empty heart." "Sophia, this is wonderful. You're becoming an incredible writer. Grandma always said I had a gift for words. I think she was right." Edward kissed his daughter's forehead. She was right about many things. At that moment, Rose appeared at the door with Rob, both carrying colorful bags. Is someone ready for a party? Rose asked, smiling. Sophia jumped from Edward's arms. Our family's anniversary party. Preparations for the celebration had begun. Weeks earlier, it wouldn't be just a party, but a celebration of everything they had built together. Edward had invited Dr. Carter, Ms. Helen Santos, who had become a family friend, Sophia's teachers, and some of the families who had been helped by the company's social programs. But there was one special surprise Edward had saved for that day. Sophia, he said, pulling up a chair to sit at her level, before the party starts, I need to give you your main present. I've already gotten so many presents this year, Sophia began. This one is different. It's a gift you gave me, and now I'm returning it. Sophia tilted her head, confused. Edward pulled a folder of legal documents from his drawer. Remember when you asked if you could really have my last name? Sophia nodded, her eyes filling with hope. These are the final papers for your adoption. You are now officially and forever Sophia Morgan, my legal daughter, with all the rights and privileges that means. Sophia looked at the documents as if they were treasures. Does this mean no one can say I'm not your real daughter anymore? It means even the government agrees you're my daughter, Edward laughed. Sophia threw herself into his arms, and Edward spun her in the air, both laughing with pure joy. Now, Rose said, wiping tears of emotion, how about we start this party? The mansion's garden had been transformed into a wonderland. Colorful lights hung from the trees. There was a giant table laden with sweets and a small stage where Sophia could perform the dance she had taught everyone. Guests arrived gradually, and Edward watched with satisfaction as Sophia circulated among them naturally, introducing her family to everyone. She had become a confident child, sure of her place in the world, radiating the happiness she had found. Dr. Carter approached Edward with a smile. How are you feeling? Never felt better in my life. Physically, yes, you're perfect, but I meant emotionally. Have you adapted to this new life? Edward looked around, Sophia teaching her dance to other children, Rose chatting animatedly with the teachers, Rob playing magician for a group of little ones. Doctor, this isn't a new life. This is my real life. That other person, obsessed with money and success, was who I thought I should be. This person here, this father, this man who learned to love. This is the real me. Ms. Helen Santos joined the conversation. Edward, can I ask a personal question? Of course. Are you sure you don't regret anything? Your life has completely changed. Less time for work, huge responsibilities, constant worries. Edward laughed. Helen, are you asking if I regret discovering true love? When you put it like that, there's no possible regret. Sophia saved me as much as I saved her, maybe more. At that moment, Sophia climbed onto the small improvised stage and asked for everyone's attention. I want to thank everyone for coming to our family's party, she began with the confidence of a beloved child. A year ago, I was a lonely girl who had no one. Today, I look at you all and see I have a huge family. Applause echoed through the garden. I want to especially thank my daddy, who taught me that love doesn't need an explanation, it just needs a heart. Aunt Rose, who taught me that family can grow when we least expect it, and Uncle Rob, who taught me that even grumpy people can become sweet when they find the right love. Rob discreetly wiped away tears. And I want to thank my grandma, who, even though she's in heaven, still takes care of all of us. She's the one who sent my daddy to find me that day. Sophia paused for a moment, gathering her thoughts. I've learned many important things this year. I learned that family isn't who has the same blood, it's who has the same love. I learned that miracles happen when we truly believe. And I learned that sometimes we need to lose everything to find what really matters. Edward felt tears stream down his face. His 7-year-old daughter had summarized the wisdom of a lifetime. Now, Sophia continued, I want everyone to dance with me because today is a day to celebrate love. The music started and the garden filled with laughter, dancing, and pure joy. Edward danced with Sophia, then with Rose, then with all the children present. Rob, who had never been one for public displays of affection, carried Sophia on his shoulders for an entire song. When the party ended and the last guests had left, the family gathered in the living room, exhausted but happy. That was the best party of my life, Sophia sighed, snuggled on the sofa between Edward and Rose. It was the first real party of my life, Edward said. I'd never celebrated anything that truly mattered. Rob sat in the armchair beside them. You know what's most incredible about all this? A year ago, I thought you were both crazy. Today, I can't imagine our family without Sophia. Sophia smiled sleepily. Uncle Rob, do you want to know a secret? Sure. I always knew you were going to love me. I was just waiting for you to figure it out yourself. Rob laughed, shaking his head. How did you know? Because people with good hearts always end up loving. Sometimes it just takes them a little while to remember they have good hearts. Rose kissed Sophia's head. My wise little girl. Edward looked at his family, feeling a deep and complete peace. He had found not only a daughter, but a purpose, a reason to live, a love that had literally saved his life. Sophia, he said softly. Yes, Daddy? Thank you for finding me on that street. Sophia smiled, her eyes already closing with sleep. Thank you for being there waiting when I needed you. When Sophia fell asleep on the sofa, Edward carried her to her room, followed by Rose and Rob. They stood for a few minutes watching her sleep, each lost in their own thoughts about the extraordinary journey they had shared. She changed all of us, Rose whispered. Taught us what really matters, Rob agreed. Edward nodded, adjusting the blanket over Sophia. She taught us that miracles exist and that the greatest of them is love. When they left the room, Edward looked one last time at his daughter sleeping peacefully, hugging the doll she had chosen on their first day together. Just over a year ago, he was a rich but miserable man, sick and alone, walking towards death. Today, he was a truly rich man, rich in love, family, purpose and joy, rich in the only things that truly mattered. The circle was complete. The man who had lost everything to find what truly mattered, and the girl who had lost everything but never lost faith in love, had built something together more valuable than any fortune. A true family, united by the kind of love that can truly move mountains and heal hearts. 2 years after that encounter that changed 2 lives forever, Edward was sitting on the same park bench where he had taken Sophia on their first day together. But this time, he wasn't alone, and he definitely wasn't dying. Sophia, now 8 years old, ran through the park with the inexhaustible energy of childhood, chasing butterflies and inventing games. Her hair flew in the wind, and her laughter echoed like music through the gardens. Edward watched her with the same wonder he'd felt since the first day, as if he still couldn't quite believe this extraordinary child was his daughter. Daddy! Sophia ran to him, breathless from playing. Did you see how fast I ran? It felt like I was flying. I did. You really did look like you were flying. Sophia sat beside him on the bench, rested her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching other families in the park. It was a ritual they had developed, these quiet moments where they simply enjoyed being together. Daddy, Sophia said thoughtfully, do you remember what it was like before you met me? Edward smiled. Sophia asked these philosophical questions regularly now, always curious about the past and future of their little family. I do. It was very different. Different how? Edward chose his words carefully. I thought I knew what was important in life, but I was completely wrong. I thought money and success were all that mattered. And now you know they're not. Now I know the only thing that truly matters is love, family, people who care about each other. Sophia nodded wisely. My teacher said that sometimes people need to lose things to find better things. Your teacher is very wise, and so are you. Sophia smiled, pleased with the compliment. Daddy, can I tell you something? Always. Sometimes I get sad when I think about Grandma and the people I lost, but then I remember that if I hadn't lost them, I never would have found you. Edward felt that familiar emotion tighten his chest. And how do you feel thinking about that? I think everything happens for a reason. Grandma always said God has a plan for everyone, and sometimes the plan includes sad things to get to the happy things. Edward, who had learned to respect Sophia's unwavering faith even without fully sharing it, nodded. Do you think our meeting was part of a plan? I'm sure of it. You needed to learn how to be a dad, and I needed to learn how to be a daughter. And we both needed to learn that family is stronger than any illness. The profound simplicity of Sophia's observations still surprised him regularly. She had grown up maintaining her natural sweetness and wisdom, but gaining a confidence and joy that made her a special child. Sophia, Edward said, there's something I never told you about that first day we met. Sophia turned to him, interested. What? When I left the hospital that day, I was thinking that maybe it would be better to give up on everything. I was very sad and very scared. And then you saw me, and then I saw you. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe there was still something good in the world. Sophia took Edward's hand, and there was me waiting for you. Edward laughed, kissing his daughter's forehead. There was you waiting for me. They sat on the bench for a few more minutes, watching the park's activity. Edward reflected on how completely his life had transformed. The company thrived under his new, humanized philosophy. Rose had moved in permanently and become the grandmother Sophia had never had, full of stories, care, and unconditional love. Rob visited almost daily, had become the favorite uncle, and had even started dating one of Sophia's teachers, a change everyone attributed to the girl's loving influence. And Edward? Edward had discovered that being a father was simultaneously the scariest and most rewarding thing he had ever done. Every day brought new challenges, from helping with homework to explaining why some people were mean, from dealing with nightmares to teaching about values and choices. But every day also brought indescribable joys. Sophia's morning smile, her school stories, her spontaneous hugs, her contagious laughter. Daddy, Sophia interrupted his thoughts. Yes, sweetheart. When I grow up and get married and have kids, will they call me Grandma? Edward laughed at the premature question. They will, and I'll be Grandpa. And will you tell them how you found me? I'll tell them our whole story, how a sad man found a brave little girl, and how together they created a family full of love. Sophia jumped off the bench, energized by the idea, and I'll teach my kids that love is the strongest medicine in the world. You will. Sophia started running again, but stopped and ran back to Edward. I forgot something important. What? Sophia hugged him tightly and whispered in his ear, I love you, Daddy, forever and ever. Edward hugged her back, feeling that immense gratitude that accompanied him every day. I love you too, Sophia, forever and ever. When they finally returned home, they found Rose preparing dinner and Rob helping set the table, scenes that had become delightfully routine. Sophia ran to tell them about her adventures in the park, and Edward watched his family gathered, still sometimes incredulous at the abundance of happiness he had found. During dinner, Sophia made an announcement. "Tomorrow, I'm going to present my essay about family to the whole school." "What essay?" Rose asked. "I wrote about how families can be born in different ways, how sometimes God brings together people who need each other." Rob smiled. "And what did you write about our family?" Sophia grew serious for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I wrote that our family started with a simple question: would you like to be my daughter? And that question changed 4 lives forever." Edward felt tears form. 4 lives. Mine, yours, Aunt Rose's, and Uncle Rob's. Because when you adopted me, we all became family. Rose discreetly wiped her eyes. "And how does your essay end?" Sophia smiled. "It ends by saying that true love can heal anything, broken hearts, serious illnesses, and even people who have forgotten how to be happy." That night, after Sophia fell asleep, Edward spent some time in her room watching her sleep. He did this almost every night, still marveling at the miracle that was his life. The girl he had found crying on the street was now a confident, intelligent child, full of love and wisdom. She had friends at school, excellent grades, and most importantly, the unwavering security of being deeply loved. And he, the man who should have died alone and bitter, had discovered that life was worth living when you had something, someone, to live for. He had learned that true success wasn't measured in money, but in smiles, hugs, moments of shared joy. He had discovered that having a family meant having a treasure more valuable than any fortune. Edward kissed Sophia's sleeping forehead and whispered, "Thank you for saving me, my daughter." Sophia stirred slightly in her sleep and murmured, "Thank you for finding me, Daddy." Edward smiled and left the room, knowing that the next day he would wake up to another day of adventures, laughter, challenges, and joys alongside the best thing that had ever happened to him. Outside, the stars shone over the mansion that had become a true home. And somewhere, Edward liked to imagine, a grandmother in heaven smiled, seeing that her granddaughter was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by love, safe in a family that had chosen her and would continue to choose her every day. The story had begun with an end, a terminal diagnosis, but it had transformed into the most beautiful of beginnings, the birth of a family united by the kind of love that can truly move mountains, heal hearts, and create miracles. Because sometimes the best stories begin exactly when we think everything is ending, and sometimes finding a family is as simple as asking a question: "Would you like to be my daughter?" Sophia's answer had changed everything, and it would continue to change everything forever and ever.